I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Child's Play 2. Now, Child's Play 2 is, of course, the 1990 sequel to the 1988 horror classic Child's Play. Now, this one is directed by Don Lafia, who actually co-wrote the first one, and the film is written by Don Mancini, who also co-wrote the first one. Now, Child's Play 2, I have to say, is probably one of my favorite of the Child's Play sequels, next to Bride of Chucky, and yes, I do like Bride of Chucky, but we'll get to that when I get to that review. But, Child's Play 2, Child's Play 2 definitely has a very different feel than the first one did. Like, the first one had a very serious tone to it, and it had kind of a gritty, realistic feel to it. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a realistic story. I mean, it was about a killer doll, but the way it was made, it made it seem realistic. This one is a little less serious in tone. Actually, this one I would call more of a black comedy than the first one was. Like, there's definitely a lot more humor in this one than there was in the first one, but I definitely enjoyed this movie a lot. Now, I don't like it as much as the first one, but it's definitely a really, really good movie. Now, the plot of the movie is it's set 2 years after the events of the first one, and what happens is the toy company that makes the good guy dolls has now gotten their hands on the remains of Chucky, because Chucky was, of course, destroyed at the end of the first movie. And what happens is, in this movie, you find out that Karen Barclay, who was the main character of the first one, has now been sent to a psychiatric hospital because, you know, she started telling people that her son's doll, Chucky, was alive. And that's one thing that I don't really like about the movie, is how they do that to the character, because she was such a likable character in the first one, but in this one they just say, oh, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital. Like, it's almost like they discard the character. I mean, you know, so I don't really like that. And also, in the first one, you had Mike Norris and another cop who find out that Chucky is alive at the end, and Mike Norris is even the person who kills Chucky at the end of the first one, but they don't mention Mike Norris or that other cop at all in this one. So it's like, what the hell happened to them? Like, where the hell were they when Karen was back in her son's story up in court? Like, where the hell were they? I mean, they do mention that there were police involved in the case, and some guy in the beginning of the movie says that the police denied everything. So if they're talking about Mike Norris in that scene, that kind of makes the character seem like kind of a douchebag, because it seems like he just abandoned Karen and Andy. But what happens is, you know, you realize that Karen Barclay is now in a psychiatric hospital, and Andy is now in foster care. But what happens is, you know, the toy company, they're rebuilding Chucky, and of course they didn't actually believe that Chucky was alive, but you find out in this movie that that toy company has been getting a lot of really bad publicity because of what happened in the first one, and they end up rebuilding Chucky. And of course what they don't realize is that the spirit of Chucky still inhabits the doll. And, you know, and you get a rather bizarre sequence where, like, as they're rebuilding the doll, you know, they're putting the doll eyes back in its head, and all of a sudden, like, it electrifies and it kills this guy. But but what happens is, long story short, it turns out that Chucky is now back from the dead, and he's now going after Andy again. Now, Andy, as I said, is in foster care, so he ends up getting adopted by this couple, and they end up taking him home, and Chucky ends up tracking him down, and now Chucky is trying to once again transfer his soul into Andy's body so he can become human again. And of course, when Andy starts telling people that Chucky's after him, they don't believe him. And that's the basic plot line of Child's Play 2. But like I said, I really enjoy Child's Play 2. Now, in the first one, I want to say that the main characters of the first one were really Karen Barclay and Mike Norris. I mean, Andy was one of the main characters of the first one, but I feel like the first one really focused more on Karen and Mike Norris, but in this one is definitely Andy's movie. Like, in this one, Andy is very much the protagonist of the movie, and it's really Andy who kind of drives this whole movie. And, like, you know, when Alex Vincent, who played Andy in the first one, he comes back to play Andy in this one, and he does a really good job. And I think he was only 10 when they made this movie, but for a 10-year-old kid, I think he does a really good job. I mean, he did a good job in the first one, but I feel like he does an even better job in this one. Yeah, Child's Play 2 is a really awesome sequel. Now, I mentioned in my review on the first one that the first one was originally intended to be kind of a satire on how the marketing for a lot of these toy companies affects children. I feel like you get more of that in this one. Like, you definitely, when you see the toy company, you know, that makes the good guy dolls, you definitely get more of a sense of, like, the soulless corporation almost. And also, I do want to mention that there is actually a sequence at the end of this movie in the toy factory, which is actually a really, really well done sequence. But, yeah, that's my review on Child's Play 2. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, and bye.